I want to welcome everyone to the second Washtenaw Dems monthly meeting being conducted on Zoom. I am learning about how to use this system, so I ask for your patience, please, if there's a couple of slip-ups in the course of the 2.5 hours. I'm Eli Nathans. I'm a member of the Washtenaw Dems Programs Committee. I'm going to serve in Zoom lingo as the host. My co-host is Satish Ramadeh, who's online. The meeting will begin with discussions with several candidates for local offices. This is the so-called Candidates Corner part of the meeting. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to use as he or she wishes to introduce him or herself. If there's time available, there can be questions. It really depends how much time they take for the self-presentation. 2 of the candidates here will be on panels later in the meeting. So they're the candidates for the judicial offices. So you will have a chance to ask questions then. If you do have a question, please use the hand raised icon at the bottom of your screen. That moves the person asking the question to the top of the screen, and then I can call on him or her. There will only be time for 1 or 2 questions in this part of the meeting. When 4 minutes have passed, a yellow page will appear on my screen. This is my wife sitting next to me who's doing this. I just alert the speaker to the nearing of the end of the time. When 5 minutes are up, a red page will appear, and that's when you really need to wrap up your comments. Of course, if you take less than 5 minutes, that's fine too. Hugo Mack has the first slot. He is a candidate for the position of Washtenaw County Prosecuting Attorney, a position now held by Brian Mackey. Dr. Mack, sir? Hugo?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hear me? Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to speak. And first of all, I hope everyone stays safe and sheltered in. You know, one of the things that the COVID virus has taught us is that we have individuals, fellow citizens, that are incarcerated. In addition to the disparate impact the virus has had on members of the African-American minority communities, it's also had a very tremendous impact on the people that are incarcerated. And, you know, 87% of the people that are incarcerated are going to be coming home. So these are fellow citizens, a debt that has to be paid to society, but nevertheless, individuals that are coming back, and we have to have humanity and respect for them also. You know, Washtenaw County is the 4th richest county in the state. Now, sometimes we may not feel like it with the taxes we pay and the cost of living, but our county actually makes more money than 79 other counties in the state. And I say that because when you put that fact in the reality that we have perhaps the highest recidivism rate in the entire state, something is wrong. I think that part of the problem is that when we have returning citizens, individuals are not made to feel fully reintegrated back into society. As you know, under state law, a person with a penitentiary experience or a felony record is not able to sit on a jury. So we send a clear message to people that despite paying a debt, individuals still will be stigmatized, and that has a tremendously disparate impact, particularly on people of color. So my point is that as the next prosecuting attorney, my responsibility is to keep people safe. One way we're going to do that is to fully offer individuals an opportunity to reintegrate into society. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, I've already spoken to Kyle Kuhnke from the Michigan Department of Corrections. And should the voters so choose to elect me, we're going to have a summit with all the employers in the county, extolling the virtues of giving somebody a chance. Just because a person has come from the penitentiary doesn't mean they're not a good worker. In fact, individuals that come from the penitentiary, most of them are on parole. So it's in their best interest to have a good work record to fully reintegrate in society. Thankfully, Michigan is one of the states that allows people to vote, part of the reintegration into society. So these things are very important, and I want everybody to know that one of the things I'm going to do as a county prosecutor, a lot of people don't realize when a person is granted a parole by the parole board, every county prosecutor has got the authority to challenge that parole in circuit court. Well, unless there's a unique case, my office will not be doing that. I believe if a person has earned a parole and earned an opportunity to be back into society, unless there's some compelling reason for public safety, I'm not going to oppose that. because once a person is convinced the parole board, a co-equal branch of government, that they deserve a chance, I'm going to give people a fair chance to reintegrate back into society. So that's the kind of sensitivity that's lacking right now. And recidivism, every time I can help someone to fully reintegrate, that makes you safer, it makes me safer, it makes the community safer. And I think once the public gets the imagery of the next prosecutor having that kind of concern and compassion, I think that's really going to affect recidivism and make us all safer.
Thank you. Do you wish to take a question or two?
Yes, we'd love to.
Are there any questions for Hugo Mack? Please use the raised hand function at the bottom of the screen. Sorry, I just have to move this.
Well, if not, there are a few more things I can say depending on your time allotment.
There is one question here, I believe. Let's see. Karen Kostema, did you have a question?
Hi, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Hi, Eli. This is Loretta
Hello, Loretta.
Tydrington. And hi, Attorney Mack. I appreciate your time and all the candidates that are here today. But my question is about you mentioned I read an article that talked about a give back program. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that program?
Okay. Are you speaking about weapons?
Yeah, it talks about weapons.
Okay, I'm not sure which program you mean. I do know that Ypsilanti Clear collaborated with the city government of Ypsilanti to buy back about 22 weapons last year, and which is a great thing. But in terms of me and addressing weapons, I intend to, with the work of law enforcement, to have a moratorium where individuals can hand in their weapons without threat of prosecution. I think that's going to give everybody an opportunity to morph from lawbreaker to law-abiding citizen without the threat of prosecution, because gun violence is a terrible problem in this county, Loretta. I'm sure you know that, particularly that mixed with drugs. So I want to send a clear message. I want everybody to have a fair chance to be a law-abiding citizen and be reintegrated in society. So that's how I intend to address that problem as the next prosecutor.
Thank you very much. Actually, Hugo Mack's time is just about up. So unless anyone has another urgent question, I think I'd like to move on to Nick Rumel. Thank you very much, Dr. Mack. Nick
Thank
Rumel?
you so much.
Good morning, Eli. Thanks again for having this opportunity and working so hard to set this up. I am reminded that the context of this election is in the midst of this global pandemic, and it's never been more important for us to exercise our rights as active citizens in a democracy and to choose our candidates wisely. And one of the things that's concerning is that in past judicial elections, so many people have skipped over the nonpartisan side of the ballot and not chosen their judges. But this is a real opportunity you have with a choice of candidates who are running for this open seat on the Washtenaw County Circuit Court. I'd like to talk just a little about myself. I am the grandson of 4 Greek immigrants. I was the first person in my family to attend college. I worked my way through the University of Michigan and Wayne State Law School, and I could have chosen to go into big law, but I didn't. I went into legal services. I worked in Detroit for people who couldn't afford attorneys, people who needed domestic abuse injunctions, were facing foreclosure, evictions, and whatever kind of law they needed. And I also got a great deal of trial experience doing that kind of thing. And when I came to Ann Arbor, I did the same thing. I worked for University of Michigan doing student rights work. I was doing family law, criminal law, civil law, also doing lots of courtroom experience at the time. Also had the chance to give back to my community during that juncture because I was on the Ann Arbor School Board for many years. I did volunteer work for everything from fighting against LGBT discrimination to serving as the co-chair of the ACLU Lawyers Committee. I coached girls soccer. I tutored at-risk kids. and did many things to give back to the community at the same time I practiced law. But the main part of my career, I would say for the past 20 years or more, is being in private practice as somebody who focuses on helping workers and helping families and fighting against discrimination and helping to give people a voice who don't necessarily have a voice in our society. And I've also had the opportunity to represent people who have been survivors of domestic abuse or sexual violence. From kids who've been in school and victimized by their teacher or coaches to several women who were victimized by Larry Nassar and Michigan State University. I also have the privilege of representing many labor unions, and having practiced law for nearly 40 years, I've had a chance not only to do everything from state court to federal court and appeals, but I've also been certified as a mediator and appointed by courts to mediate disputes. So I have a great deal of experience I'd like to bring to the bench to help people solve their legal problems. And I hope to have that opportunity. So
Thank you very much.
thanks.
I think I am not going to allow questions now because we are a little bit behind schedule. For those who joined the meeting within the past 10 minutes, I should explain, this is the candidates corner. A number of candidates asked to have the chance to speak directly to those in attendance at this meeting, and each is given roughly 5 minutes to do so. Later in the meeting, there will be panels that will be composed of candidates for judicial positions. And in those panels, all of the candidates for those positions will have a chance to introduce themselves and to answer questions. So that's just by way of explanation of what's going on right now. And now, thank you very much, Nick, for that discussion. I appreciate that. I'd like to turn to Tracy Vandenberg. Would you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Vandenberg. I'm a candidate for Washtenaw County Circuit Court Judge. Thank you for coming. One thing I want to focus on a little bit in this portion of the agenda, because you will hear a lot from us later, is the fact that I bring a unique skill set to this position. I am not only a very experienced family law attorney and trial attorney, having represented families from the trial court to the Supreme Court. I have practiced in all the courts in this state, also in federal court, Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, as well as I'm a certified domestic mediator. I'm a clinical social worker, and why that's important, I practiced social work almost exclusively for almost a decade, treating adolescents with substance abuse issues and mental health issues, doing family therapy, and treating adults with serious psychiatric issues. And why that's important to this seat is that the judges of this court have designated this seat as a family court seat. And so the judge will solely be hearing petitions for personal protection orders, custody, divorce, support cases. The common thread that runs through these cases is that we have families in crisis. And my unique background, not only my expertise in family law, which I've been committed to long-term and working with survivors of domestic violence, but my unique background as a clinical social worker makes me particularly able to help these families navigate the difficult times. Our courtrooms today function often more like emergency rooms than courtrooms. Judges in today's courts are not just faced with legal problems. In fact, I think if you speak with any judge in the circuit court, they'll tell you a lot of what they're dealing with are societal problems, substance abuse, mental health. I am committed to problem-solving courts. One thing I did as a legal aid lawyer, I was a legal aid lawyer here in Washtenaw County, where I represented over 1,000 of our low-income county residents, helping them maintain housing in family law cases, domestic violence survivors get PPOs. One of the things I did to expand their services is I liaisoned with Eastern Michigan University School of Social Work and became a field supervisor, where I had social work students working under my direct supervision and completing their field internships at legal services so they could provide wraparound holistic services to people who came to legal aid. I'm going to do the same thing if I'm elected. I'm the only person who can provide these services as a clinical social worker because I'm the only one qualified to supervise these students. And this would be at no cost to the county. So here we could have graduate level social work students helping our families navigate the court system and getting the assistance they need, whether that's stabilizing housing, getting substance abuse treatment, getting mental health treatment, counseling. This is my commitment, and I am committed to this long term. And I think that's really important because a family stays with the judge. You don't want that family after 2 years when the next judge comes in getting moved to the next judge. But historically, that is what has happened with the family law docket in Michigan. Our judges are trying to change that, which is why Chief Judge Carol Kuhnke has endorsed me, as well as Timothy Connors, as well as Patrick Conlon on the circuit court. They're supporting me because they know my track record of being committed to families long-term. And my commitment to Washtenaw County Children's and Families is, if you elect me, I'll stay with you long-term. Your docket will not get passed on to the new judge and the new judge and the new judge every time someone new comes in. I'll be with you for the long haul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. The next speaker in this part of the program is Felicia Brabeck, who is a candidate for the vacant seat in the 55th District of the Michigan House of Representatives. Felicia?
Good morning, everyone. It's been exciting to hear everyone and to see that participant number increase and increase and increase. I know that all of us, even though we can't all be at the LRC together, that we're all joining in kind of this new norm that we have right now. So I'm happy to be here with everyone. And like Eli said, I'm Felicia Brabeck and running and hoping to be the next state representative in the 55th District. I'm currently a county commissioner, and I'm also a clinical psychologist. And if elected, would be the only mental health care practitioner in the state house. And I think that that's important because right now we are facing a mental health crisis here in our state. And having someone who's a practitioner, I've been practicing for over 20 years in the field and currently still do. I believe that that combination of mental health experience and expertise and local government experience, that combination that I could bring to work with colleagues who are at the State House right now would be beneficial to our residents. And so today I'd like to share a little bit about who I am and my story and why I'm running. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. My dad is Black, my mom is white, and we grew up in a more segregated suburb and grew up in the white area. My parents couldn't have been married legally 5 years before they actually were. And so my sister and I watched our parents have to navigate difficult situations and watch them do that with patience and grace and justice and continue to desire to give back to the community. In fact, my father was pulled over 2 blocks from our house and asked what he was doing in that neighborhood. And so this is how I grew up, with that sense of recognizing that things could be different and then being motivated to change them. In fact, my mom was on the Human Relations Committee in our town. And so that's kind of the basis that I grew up in. We also were a union household. My dad is IBEW for 47 years. My mom is a teacher, so is my sister, and our union members, their equivalent of the MEA. And what the union offered for our family was stability and healthcare and opportunities that my dad would not have had were it not for the union. And so that's the basis that I grew up in. And my parents then offered us resources and opportunities. So I went off to college and then went off to graduate school and got my master's in clinical social work and returned to my hometown and worked at one of the public high schools as a school social worker. But knew that I wanted to know more for my clients, and so pursued further education and earned my doctorate in clinical psychology. And then moved here to Ann Arbor 17 years ago for my postdoc fellowship at Michigan, and have, like I said before, have a private practice here where I get to work with adolescents and adults. Then now have this combination of working at the county with colleagues as a county commissioner. And so as a county commissioner, one of the things that I'm most proud of, the work that we've gotten to do as colleagues, is moving forward and pushing forward our county's first ever racial equity policy. And that work took years of working together with both staff and other elected officials and community members. And we finally passed it and now have capacity to be able to really address inequities in a way that we had, a more comprehensive way than we had before. So I'm hoping to be able to continue that at the state. That's one of the reasons why. So there are two main reasons why I'm running here in the 55th. One is because we definitely need more practitioners, more healthcare practitioners in the State House. Again, like I said, I'd be the only mental health care practitioner out of the 110 representatives, and think that that's important. And secondly, I'd like to be able to continue the equity work that we have been doing here at the county. Right now, I'm part of a statewide council through the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, where we're working on this equity work, both in the educational system and with local governmental units. So our team for the campaign is amazing. We have amazing staff and interns. Our campaign decided to not take any corporate PAC money. And so our campaign is all individual based, and we have over 600 individual contributors to the campaign. And we're just really focusing on reaching out to our residents here in the 55th. And so would love for folks to join us. If you'd like to join us and want to know more about the issues that we're hoping to work on, and I'm hoping to be able to work on for the residents of the 55th, please check out our website. It's FeliciaBrayback.com. If you'd like to volunteer for the campaign, please write us at teambrayback@gmail.com. And finally, for those of you who are residents of the 55th, I humbly ask for your vote for the August primary. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Felicia. We now enter a second phase of the meeting. Chris Savage, the chair of the WCDP, will say a few words, and I see that Representative Yusuf Rabi is here to talk about recent developments in Lansing. Chris.
Hey everybody, how are you doing? I hope you are weathering the new reality that we're under these days. I'm making the adjustments myself. I think we're all trying to sort out what the new normal looks like. I think one of the things that I really wanted to, there are two things that I really want to encourage people to think about. First is, on a very positive note, this is a time where a lot of us are actually reconnecting with family and friends that we may have lost touch with in the hurry scurry of our normal lives. And I think that's a positive thing. And I just want to really encourage people to reach out to folks that you know who are perhaps living alone or don't have the social network that others may have, and just make sure we're checking in on each other. I think it's an interesting situation where we are physically apart, but in some ways we're being drawn together in new ways. And I think that's something we should take advantage of and carry with us as we move into whatever this looks like over the next few months and even years. The reality is we probably will be practicing some sort of social distancing for the coming year. So until we have a vaccine, and certainly until we have a treatment for COVID-19, this virus doesn't just go away. It can be, the spread of it can be mitigated, but until we have an actual vaccine and an actual treatment for the disease when you get it, in order to keep this from coming back and coming back harder like it did with the Spanish flu in the early 1900s, we're going to have to continue to do this. So while we're doing that, let's make sure that we are connecting with folks who might be more isolated than others, and that just restore those bonds with friends and family that we might have let maybe atrophy a little bit in our normal life. The second thing that I want to bring up is how acutely apparent it has become on a partisan level which party in Michigan is actually being the adult in the room, quite frankly, in terms of how we are dealing with this. And I know Yusuf's going to talk more about this, but I just wanted to, to make sure that, as we talk, and I mentioned this last month, but as we talk about candidates and they're asking for money and they're running and they're asking for your help, it is critical that we replace Republicans at the state legislature and also in Washington, because we can see very visibly on a day-to-day basis which party is acting in a responsible way to control this this pandemic that's sweeping the globe, and which is using it to exploit it for political gain and power. Just this week we had probably several hundred at the most, just ridiculous protesters. I call them terrorists, frankly. Basically descend on the state capitol, and they were brandishing weapons. They were dressed in paramilitary gear. They were carrying nooses. They were talking about lynching the governor. This kind of stuff is terrorism. It is intended to terrorize people. It is intended to instill fear in them. And it is in complete disregard for the safety of the people around them. And they, the contrast between the rally that they held on and the protest that they held on Thursday, and the last really truly big one that was held in 2012 when labor folks tried to stop right to work, is that there were no weapons in 2012. There were tens of thousands of people, but there were no weapons. And the people then were not just, removed, they were actually locked out of the Capitol building. Yet on Thursday, Senator Shirkey, the Senate leader, actually invited these people in. They were allowed to go into the gallery. They brought their weapons in with them, and then they proceeded to threaten people. And it's one thing to do a rowdy protest. It's another thing to do it when you're carrying semi-automatic rifles. And to see this as anything but terrorism is to misread it, in my opinion. So we absolutely need to keep our focus on electing Democrats, because the contrast is stark. And I know a lot of us don't want to be partisan, and it seems crass to be talking politics in a time when hundreds of people are dying every day in our state from this disease. But we are not going to have a rational and thoughtful and effective response to this unless we put people in charge who are rational. And right now that's not happening. So I just want to remind people that, I know that it does seem sometimes crass to be asking for money for politicians and stuff that are running for office. But as Democrats, we absolutely have to get these people elected. We cannot take our eye off the ball, even though our reality has changed significantly. So I just want to put that out there. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Yusuf. Robbie, he's a state representative. He was very passionate about what he saw there on Thursday and the weeks before that. And, Yusuf, if you could give us an update and let us know what you're doing. And you are muted right now, so make sure you unmute yourself.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you all for having me on today. So, I just wanted to kind of give an update on some of the things that had happened. I know we have Jeff Irwin and some of our other legislators on the call here today who are obviously there as well. But just to give you kind of an overview of the day and what happened in Lansing as sort of a legislative update and just an update on what happened. In terms of the actual legislating that happened, Chris is absolutely right. The Republicans are, instead of helping to solve people's problems, helping to, solve this backlog on the unemployment system and making sure that people get the health care that they need, Republicans are playing politics in Lansing. And so we did three things in the legislature. The first thing that we did is we reduced the criminal penalties for violating an executive order. That's one of the things the Republicans put up to vote on. The second thing they put up to vote on was a bill which codified a bunch of the governor's EOs. And I think the best way that I can describe what they were attempting to do with this is it's like you're driving a car. The governor's driving the car and the Republicans are in the passenger seat. And the Republican says, we're going to drive to the next stop sign. And the Republicans say, why don't you give us the steering wheel? We'll drive to the next stop sign. And that's basically what they were trying to do, is take over the governor's executive orders and make them be able to control it so that they could say when they ended, and how expansive they were. So that's one of the bills that they had put forward. It was a Senate Bill 858. And then the third thing that they did was they put forward a resolution to sue the governor for her, for her coronavirus response. And so literally it was playing politics. I mean, why are we spending money on a lawsuit when we should be spending money on helping people to get healthcare, helping people to get unemployment? Absolutely unacceptable. But that's what the Republicans called us to Lansing to do. And that same day, there was a rally that was organized by, they were many white supremacists. They were, I think Chris accurately described them as terrorists. They were there to intimidate. They were there to, push an agenda across that, not only did they want the government to shut down, or for the shutdown for the coronavirus, orders to end, but it was really about more than that. And you could tell based on the rhetoric that they were using that there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of racism, there was a lot of sexism in their voice, in their signs, in the things that they were saying. They were there to intimidate. They were there to push that agenda forward. At a certain point, about 250 of them were able to get into the Capitol building. As Chris had mentioned, many of them were armed with, these are not rifles that are used for self-defense. These are, automatic rifles, and the only thing that those things are used for is harming people. They weren't trying to hide them. They were brandishing them. They were holding them on their bodies. Many of them were wearing camo. Many of them had bulletproof vests with pouches. Many of them had, hats with different gear on top. And at one point, as I was walking from my office to the floor, I saw a group of them essentially in single file, marching up the steps towards the lobby outside of the doors of where we were having our session. We were in a little bit of a recess at that time, but when I got to the floor, I went the back way to get up because I didn't want to have to go through the crowd. I went the back way to get up, and when I got up there, the whole building was rattling. The crowd was yelling and screaming. They were saying, "Let us in." They were saying, essentially they were stating their intention to, go through the double doors and come onto the floor of the House. And when you watch the video later, you can hear them yelling that and saying, those things, that they wanted to get on the floor. Obviously, how are legislators supposed to take, that type of aggressiveness? How are legislators supposed to take it when a bunch of armed people who have Confederate flags and are, saying racist things, and have these, guns and paramilitary gear? How are we supposed to take it when they're also yelling that they want to get on the floor and they're, aggressively, making their presence known? And it was a very scary experience for a lot of us. And one of the things that I, that I point out too is that, this is a place where our democracy is supposed to be happening. And it felt like something out of, that you would see in other countries, where paramilitaries try to shut down government and try to take over the operations of what's happening. The pictures in the Senate of the, terrorists in the galleries with their guns, and I know that Senator Santana had to wear, she wore a bulletproof vest to make her safer, feel safer. And I know that that's something that a number of other legislators are considering doing now, because these thugs and terrorists are, we expect them to be back. We expect them to be back in force, and it's just a really scary experience to see our democracy under attack and under threat like that. Not to mention the fact that none of them were wearing masks. There was maybe like 3 or 4 people wearing masks that I saw the whole time. Everybody else, no mask, in very close quarters, in very close proximity. You could, they were violating every single, order that they possibly could, all in one fell swoop. So it is absolutely unacceptable what happened. It was a testament of the worst, of humanity, in my opinion. And to add insult to injury, and really emphasizing what Chris was saying, I actually saw Republican legislators go out there and speak with the crowd, and encourage them. and what they're doing. So there's actually video footage of people like Matt Maddock, you know, who would go out there and actually talk to the mob. And so that's really unacceptable, and something that that I think is important that we really highlight as Democrats. You know, especially this shouldn't be partisan, but they have made it partisan. They have made it absolutely about politics over helping people, and it highlights a lot of the systematic problems that we have, you know, within our state legislature. And I see some questions popping up, but you know, just to be clear, guns are allowed in the Capitol, but signs are not allowed in the Capitol. So people can, it is currently allowed for people to bring those guns in, but I think that we should be calling for that practice to end. I don't think it's acceptable to have these types of guns in the Capitol when democracy is trying to take place. It is really unacceptable. So, you know, that's kind of, I don't know, Chris, if you wanted me to mention anything else, but I think I'll kind of stop there in the interest of time.
That's great. Thanks, Yusuf. That, you know, I hope that you are able to be successful in keeping guns out of the state capitol. I just think it's ridiculous. And just so people know that, you know, that happened back again in that same time period when labor was fighting right to work. That was when the Republicans under Jace Bolger in the House changed the rules and prevented signs from being brought in because, of course, the labor folks were bringing in signs, but they did not change the open carry rules there. I think we do need to move on. So with that, I'm going to ask Congresswoman Dingell, who has joined us, to say a few words. And Debbie, you are muted right now, so make sure you unmute yourself. And one of the things that folks have been asking about is election security. I know there's a HR 6202. I don't know how much you know about that, but if you could speak a little bit about what will happen moving forward, and at least what efforts are being made to secure our elections in light of the pandemic. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Yusuf was very moving. I posted his video yesterday because I wanted people to understand what was happening in Lansing. And, you know, I think we're having some really difficult moments right now as we think about our Constitution, freedom of speech, freedom of protest, but common good. And is it okay if somebody yells fire in a crowded movie theater, and bringing those guns into the legislature was just a very disturbing picture for all of us. But I would say to all of you that one of the #1 focuses of Democrats is to secure our elections in November. I have to say this to you, that I was with Yusuf. Normally when I'm doing town halls with Yusuf, protesters come. Yusuf once said to me, "Does this happen all the time?" And I said, "No, just when I'm with you." But it's not, I mean, and I think the right to protest is great, and I think people need to be able to express their opinion, but I think we have to do it in a civil way. But the story I want to tell here is that I was with Yusuf doing a town hall on Medicare for All, which we both deeply believe in, and I might add as an aside, this experience has put a microscope on the need for it. But students came in, and some and residents of Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County wanting to know if Donald Trump would leave the White House, fearful that Donald Trump would not leave the White House. This was a year ago, I guess, right about now. And I was like, of course that could never happen in the United States. We have a military that would never let it happen. And we won't let it happen. I want to say that to you all. But I think the fears of young people early on, and a lot of other people, that this president is totally, you don't know what he's going to do, is frightening. I do not believe that he would be allowed not to leave the White House. I believe that there are people in both parties that are going to protect this democracy. But I think the last 2 years for me has made it very clear we cannot take our democracy for granted. We have to think about what it really means, what those liberties are, how we protect them, how you balance privacy with the right of the common good. And there are a lot of those questions right now. Protecting the November election is one of the top priorities we as Democrats have. in Washington. Many of you met John Sarbanes when he spoke to the Washtenaw Dems dinner, and he is leading the effort for all of us. We tried in the first CARES Act to get specific additional money. There was some money that was put in to protect or to give strength to Secretary of States to prevent hacking by foreign countries. But we are very worried about what is going to happen in November. And I think this is going to be both a federal issue and a state level issue, because I think we, you know, I would like to see, we've approved, it was on the ballot, that there's no excuse, vote by mail. We need to encourage everybody to sign up to vote by mail. But as the governor has instructed for the May elections, I'd like to see everybody have the ability to vote by mail and just mail everybody an AB ballot. That's not going to happen because Republicans aren't going to allow it to happen at the federal level or the state level. But we're going to damn well fight trying to do it. And I think it's really important right now that you be communicating to all of your legislators the importance of protecting our election system. So at the federal level, the bill that Chris is talking about, we are doing everything possible to give strength and to the Secretary of States and to ensure that they've got the proper technology, the proper safeguards in place to protect our elections. And many of us would like to get a national vote by mail program. I think as long as President Trump's in the White House and Mitch McConnell is in the Senate, that's not going to happen, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to fight for it. And there are Republicans that do care about the integrity of our elections. So I know that's what you wanted me to talk about, Chris. So I would say it's the #1 priority for us. We are looking at including provisions in CARE 2. Nancy Pelosi has this at the top of her mind. We're talking about what the provisions will be. I think it's good to focus on that bill because that bill has what we want. That bill won't become law, but we can focus on what we can get into a CARES 2 package that does strengthen and protect our election system and make sure the president signs it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And be safe out there. It's going back and forth to Washington's got to be a challenge. I just want to point out that we have nearly 100 people on this meeting today. So that's pretty huge accomplishment. Cheers to our programs committee for putting this together. With that, I want to turn it over briefly to Janet Cannon. She's one of the co-vice chairs for our precinct organizing operation. While we've been in lockdown, they have been busy as heck just getting things organized for our precinct delegates. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janet. Janet, you need to unmute and turn your video on.
Am I there?
You are.
Okay, so thanks very much for giving me a minute. As you can hear, there are some very, very urgent calls to action. We really need to get this election to help, to work. And for that, we need every possible blue vote. We have a lot of them that have been untapped here in Washtenaw County. Every person in this meeting can help. So in particular, we have not had a lot of people getting back. We have many strong activists getting back to be precinct delegate, but we do not have as many as we'd hoped for. And we quite understand that with this crazy, crazy period, it's hard to envision what can I actually do. But in fact, we have lots of things that can be done safely from home. And when we get to the point where we can go out and talk to voters, for those who are willing to do that, we will have lots and lots of support and training. So please don't feel shy, and don't feel shy about getting in touch and saying we want to work with the precinct organizing committee, but I don't want to canvass, because there's lots of stuff we can have you do without, okay? So just a quick note, if you want to be a precinct delegate and have your name on the ballot, which you can then frame and put on your wall, it is the affidavit, notarized affidavit must be in by May 5th. So it's coming right up. We've got a couple more days in which that can happen. We also have lots and lots of room for people who we are calling precinct organizers who are not delegates on the ballot, okay? So contact us at poc@washtenaw.dems.org, or simply go on our website and hit the volunteer button and let us know what you're interested in. Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks so much. So we are a little ahead of schedule. Is Carol Kuhnke online yet?
I have not seen her, but I'm prepared to take a 30-second break so that I can organize the panel. And if
Okay.
Judge Kuhnke is here, she can speak. If she's not here yet, then we'll just start the panel and we'll move her in, later in the meeting.
That sounds great. Okay, so we'll take a brief break then.
So I see that Carol Kuhnke is here. I would also like to ask the panelists on the first judicial panel for candidates for the circuit court position, please, since you have now, with one exception, been moved into the attendee category, to raise your hands. And while Judge Kuhnke is speaking, I will make you panelists so that you can then speak to the group. So I would like to recognize, let's see, Carol Kuhnke, I believe, is here. Let me see. If Carol Kuhnke is in the audience, Judge Kuhnke, would you please, yes, I see you have raised your hand, and I'm going to promote you to panelist, and then you will be able to speak. Judge Kuhnke is going to speak for about 10 minutes on the Washtenaw County Circuit Court. She is the chief judge of the Washtenaw County Circuit Court. She was elected in 2012, became chief judge in 2019. So I believe now you should be able to speak. Judge Kuhnke, are you there?
I certainly am.
Fantastic. The meeting is yours.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everybody. It's strange to be addressing such a big group in this way, but I'm glad that we do have such a big group. We have important elections this year, and it's going to be more challenging than ever to affect the outreach that we Democrats have to do to ensure that people get out and vote and that they know who our candidates are. I mention that because judicial candidates, as you know, are not identified as being Republicans or Democrats or anything else on the ballot. So our challenge is to make sure that we do our job and affect the outreach that needs to happen. It's difficult. It's more difficult during these quarantine times, but we all have the ability to get the message out to our friends and relatives and neighbors, and to ensure that people are getting out and voting. So I was asked to talk about the structure of the courts in Washtenaw County, and if I can share my screen. Here we are. No.
Eli, you may have to stop sharing so that Judge Kuhnke can share hers.
Okay, I'll do that. All right.
That should give you the option, Carol, to share yours now.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Here we go. This is a diagram of our trial courts in the state of Michigan and how it breaks out all the way down to the district courts in Washtenaw County. At the top, you see the district court, and we have three different district courts in Washtenaw County. We have the 15th district, which encompasses the city of Ann Arbor. We have 14B, which is Ypsilanti Township, and 14A, which is the rest of Washtenaw County, everything that's not the city of Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti Township. There are 7 judges among those 3 courts, excuse me, and the district court is of interest to us this year because there's a vacancy in the 14B district court, and that's the race that is Elaine Washington and Mark Nelson. The district court is considered a trial court, as is the circuit court and the probate court. The district court handles misdemeanors. It handles landlord-tenant, small claims, civil matters where the amount in controversy is under $25,000. I think that generally encompasses or describes what the district court does. appeals from the district court go to the circuit court. So that's why you see a bracket taking right down to the 22nd Circuit Court. If you're unhappy in your district court result, then you appeal to the circuit court. The circuit court is also, acting as a court of appeals to the district court, the circuit court is also considered a trial court, which means that we handle trials when a case is first filed in the circuit court, then those cases go to trial in the circuit court. There are 5 judges in the circuit court, and the circuit court handles felonies, family law cases, and civil disputes where the amount in controversy is over $25,000. Also at the circuit court level is a probate court, which we have 2 probate judges in Washtenaw County. You see a tie bar between those 2 courts on the diagram because we are in Washtenaw County a unified trial court, which means that the Supreme Court, which has administrative authority over all of the courts in the state of Michigan, the Supreme Court determined that our circuit court and probate court should be unified. And that means that we, all 7 of us, 5 circuit judges and the 2 probate judges, can cross cover each other and can handle each other's matters, which is how we end up with, for example, Judge Darlene O'Brien, who is an elected probate judge, handling criminal matters and family law matters and not handling any actual probate. Above us in the circuit court and the probate court is the Court of Appeals. And there are 24 judges in the Court of Appeals. We are fortunate to have one of those judges from Ann Arbor, that's Douglas Shapiro, who was a very excellent attorney and is an excellent appellate judge. And then above the Court of Appeals, of course, is the Michigan Supreme Court. There are 7 justices, and we are fortunate to have one of those justices, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Bridget McCormick, is from Washtenaw County. So that is essentially an overview of the courts. I mentioned who's running for the 14B District Court up here. And then the other judicial election that we have this year is 1 seat in the circuit court to replace Judge Dave Swartz, who is retiring at the end of this year. And the candidates for that seat are Tracy Vandenberg, Guy Conti, Nick Rommel, and Amy Reiser, 4 folks. Those 2 elections will run differently, assuming that nobody else files petitions to run in the district court. There will not be a primary there. That election will be only the November election. For the circuit court, since there are more than 2 people running, and this won't change if anybody new gets into the race, they will have a primary in August. And you will be asked to vote for 1 candidate, and the 2 top vote getters will go on to the November election. I think that's about all I have to say about the structure of the courts. I think everybody knows that these are important positions, that unlike our legislative partisan elections, the court elections, judicial elections rarely result in a challenger to an incumbent. So what that means to us is that when we elect a judge, for better or for worse, we get that judge likely for the rest of that judge's working career until they turn 70. I've been fortunate that after being elected in 2012, I did not have a challenger in 2018. These are all 6-year terms, and it's rare that a sitting judge is challenged. So this is, we can look at the legislators being elected to 2 or 4 6-year terms, and these are 6-year terms here in the court, but effectively they have a much greater likelihood of being a for-life election. I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
See, I don't see any raised hands. So I think we're going to say thank you. Oh, yep, Jimmy W has a raised hand. Just a second. Jimmy, you should be able to pose a question.
Yes, can you hear me?
I
Yes.
can.
Yes, my question would be, how often does the chief judge rotate the circuit court judges around to different cases? I know that the current seat that the candidates will be running for is more of a family law docket, but in a couple of years, what is the likelihood that they will be rotated to criminal law?
So that decision is made by the chief judge. I am in my second year chief judge, and my current appointment goes through the end of 2021. As to how assignments change, there are a lot of things, a lot of factors that go into changing assignments, which are what is the workload of a judge, what are the skills of a judge, and is the preference of the judge. And the person who wins the circuit court seat will have an assignment that's 100% family law for at least the first 2 years. We have another vacancy coming up on the bench with Archie Brown, who will not be eligible to run again, and his current term will end at the end of 2023. At that time, there's a possibility that the person who wins this seat could keep the same assignment or get a different assignment based on how things move around and what are the skills of the next person that's elected, et cetera.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to take a 30-second break to set up the panel for the next part of this meeting. So give us please 30 seconds. And if Judge Kuhnke, if you could please exit share, then I think we'll be back to the screen we were on before. Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, so I believe that the 4 panelists for the next panel are all present. They've been introduced. I'd like to discuss briefly the ground rules for the panel. So each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an introductory statement and also to answer each question posed. At the end of the question period, each candidate will also have 2 minutes to make a final statement. Caroline Nathans, my better half, will display a yellow page in my screen when there are 30 seconds left, and a red page when the 2-minute limit has been reached. Thank you. I trust that will be all we need to stay on track. I will proceed in alphabetical order by last name. So in the introductions, Mr. Kuhnke will be first, followed by Ms. Reiser, etc. Responses to the questions will start with Ms. Reiser and then move through Mr. Kuhnke, so that each candidate will have the opportunity to be the first one to answer questions. I will begin with several questions that were submitted to me in advance of the meeting, and then I will then open up the floor to questions from members of the audience. Thank you very much. Mr. Kuhnke, would you please take 2 minutes for an introduction? Guy Kuhnke, can you hear me?
Yes, I had to unmute. Thank you. Good morning. First, my name is Guy Kuhnke. I'm a local attorney. I've been licensed here in the state of Michigan since 2005. I want to thank the party and especially Mr. Nathans for putting this together. I realize that these are challenging times, what with the pandemic and so forth, and I hope that everyone is weathering it as well as possible. I'd like to also express my support for that woman in Lansing for being arrogant enough for wanting to keep us all alive, and I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that's what I believe, and I think that she's doing a great job. I wanted to also express my condolences to Amy Reiser on the passing of her mom. You know, if the true signal of someone being a success in life are their children, then she did a great job, Amy. So sorry. This campaign has been fun and educating, but because of the pandemic, because my wife is someone with multiple immunosuppressed issues. Because we will be getting out into the public and pressing the flesh, and I cannot, and I repeat, cannot and will not risk my wife's health in order to do this. And because the county deserves candidates who are fully and absolutely committed to this, I am announcing my withdrawal. I do have enough signatures to make the ballot, but I don't think it's fair to the county or to my opponents to do so at this time. I want to thank my campaign committee, and I would like to also say that I am publicly endorsing Nick Rummel. Nick, I think, is a great candidate, and he has conducted himself with honor and integrity, and he will be an excellent circuit court judge. And I thank you for the 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kuhnke. I did not expect that. And to Amy Reiser, I want to also extend my sympathy. Ms. Reiser, you're next.
Thank you. Thank you, Guy, and thank you, Eli. I did lose my mom this week, so I wasn't really expecting to talk about it. But thank you for organizing this, and I'm very impressed with the number of participants, and happy that everyone gets to see who the candidates are. I'm Amy Reiser, and I'm one of the candidates for Circuit Court. I've lived in Washtenaw County since 2002. My husband and I live in Dexter. We're raising our 2 children here. I grew up in Wayne County. My mom, who recently passed, worked in the public schools. She was a paraprofessional, and then she worked as a custodian. My dad worked for Marathon Oil Refinery for 30 years, where he was a member of the Teamsters Local 283. And I worked in high school. I worked my way through college, and moved back in to my home on Grosse Ile when I went to law school at the University of Detroit Mercy. And I've served the communities of Kalamazoo and Washtenaw County. And my goal in life when I went to law school was to be a public servant, to serve the community. And that's the main reason that I'm running for Circuit Court Judge, is to continue to serve the citizens of Washtenaw County. I've been a prosecutor for 18 years. I've worked with every walk of life in our community. Domestic violence victims, sexual assault victims. I've been in the courtroom every day, handling probate hearings, handling PPOs. So I think that my vast experience makes me an excellent candidate, and I look forward to the campaign trail. I look forward to serving the community, to continue my service to the community. My website is amyreiser.com if you'd like more information on my qualifications. Thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Nick Rummel.
Thank you, Eli, and thanks to the Washtenaw Dems for putting this on. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd also like to express my condolences to Amy and her family. It's a demonstration of your strength, Amy, that you are here with us today. And Guy Kuhnke, you and I spoke yesterday, and I know how much that this campaign meant to you, but you deferred that because of family, and that's a testament to your character as well. Family has never been more important than it is right now. I've spoken to thousands of you in the last few weeks. You're scared. You're worried about your jobs, your families, your health, your way of life. I've had the opportunity to train lawyers in the new legislation, not just here in Michigan, but throughout the country. My entire campaign in my career is all about giving a voice to the underserved and giving back to my community. I'm Nick Rummel, and I'm running for judge. I am the only candidate with extensive experience in all the areas that are heard by the circuit court that Judge Kuhnke just told you about: family, civil, and criminal. I want to use my experience to help people resolve their legal problems peaceably. My experience is what's earned me the endorsements of nearly 350 leaders, from your Attorney General Dana Nessel to local judges, elected officials, attorneys, and other community activists. The most experienced voice in the courtroom should be the judge. The people who come before the court deserve no less. Thank you, and I look forward to telling you more today.
Thank you very much. Tracy Vandenberg. Tracy?
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. Amy, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just so sorry. I'm Tracy Vandenberg, running for Washtenaw County Circuit Court Judge. Look, the new judge will hear PPO petitions, half of all the divorce, custody, and support cases. As a clinical social worker, a master's level clinical social worker, with comprehensive mental health and substance abuse training, a longtime legal aid lawyer, having served over 1,000 of our low-income Washtenaw residents, representing them in many areas of the law, but particularly working with survivors of domestic violence and divorce and custody, and having worked with hundreds of families in this county on family law issues, I am uniquely qualified for this job. My commitment to families is long-term, and this has been throughout my career. My track record in this area is unparalleled, which is why I've earned the endorsements of our 3 progressive circuit court judges. Chief Judge Carol Kuhnke, who is just here, has endorsed my candidacy, Peacemaking Judge Timothy Connors, Judge Patrick Conlin, Supreme Court Justice Megan Kavanaugh, and Marilyn Kelly, retired Supreme Court justices. They are looking for expertise in this area on the bench. It is important to understand a custody case can go on for years, and the court has jurisdiction over these cases for years. Our families deserve a judge who will stay with them through the process. And I am absolutely committed to using my social work background and my expertise in this area of the law and other areas. I'm an experienced trial lawyer as well, to help them navigate this difficult time. Thank you for having me today. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much. The first question, again, based on suggestions made to me, is as follows. The family division of the circuit court deals mostly with people in crisis. What percentage of your practice has focused on family law, defined as divorce, custody, and parenting time, both in the recent past and during the entirety of your career? I'd like to start with Amy Reiser. Ms. Reiser, would you take this question first?
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so the audio was cutting out for a minute. And so the first part of the question that I heard, Eli, involved people in crises and the percentage of my practice that would involve, did you say family court trial?
That has focused on family law, defined as divorce, custody, and parenting time, issues that will come before the circuit court.
Sure. So the beginning of my practice, when I graduated from law school in 1998, I worked at the Women's Justice Center in Detroit, and I worked for a sole practitioner, Ken Prather, and the entirety of that practice was divorce, child custody, and family law matters. Since that time, in 2003, I've been an assistant prosecutor. So my practice has involved trials on a daily basis, both bench trials and misdemeanor trials, felony trials. And that has, for the last 18 years, involved families in crisis. That's children being abused by their parents, victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And so I think the similarities there with the family court are families that are coming there for a divorce or child custody. That is a very stressful and a very hard situation to come to court, but you certainly don't want to come for your marriage.
Amy, at least in my system, you are. I have a hard time.
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry, I lost internet connection there for a second. So my work has involved families in crises for the last 18 years, children of survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So I think I bring that unique experience to the family court. And these families are coming in crises, and that's what I deal with every day as an assistant prosecutor, handling PPOs, handling sexual assault trials, handling homicide trials. Those individuals and those citizens in our community are in crises. And that's exactly what the family court seat will handle, is people in crises. And so that's why I think I'm the best candidate for this position.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yes, if you could answer this question also. I'm going to move down the candidates in alphabetical order.
Got it. Nearly 40 years ago, when I was at the Free Legal Aid Clinic in Detroit, a woman came to see me, and she had a grocery bag with her. And she told me about the abuse that she suffered from her partner. And she showed me what was in the bag, and it was filled with her hair. It had been pulled out by her partner, and she saved it. And I took that bag to court, and I got her a domestic violence injunction. And since that time, I have devoted a significant part of my practice to protecting victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. I have handled family law cases in Wayne County, both domestic violence injunctions and divorces with and without children. And when I first came to Ann Arbor, I did family law as a regular part of my practice for well over a decade, handling divorces with children, without children, custody matters, and a significant part was protection of partners in abusive relationships. I have spent a great deal of my practice in the last 20 plus years representing survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, everywhere from young children who were abused by teachers or coaches or parents, to 3 women who were victimized by Larry Nassar in Michigan State University. I understand the dynamics that go on with families and people who are in abusive relationships. I have significant family law experience, and I am eager to put that to work for people in Washtenaw County, because family rights are civil rights. And you can do a lot of justice to help people in those situations. And I look forward to helping people resolve those situations peaceably and safely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tracy Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. My entire career, both of my careers for that matter, almost as a social worker for almost a decade. I worked with adolescents. I was the mental health director for a substance abuse program for adolescents who came to me as an alternative to incarceration. And my job was to treat them and keep them out of Spofford Juvenile Detention Center in New York, which is particularly rough prison. I moved from that position to working as a psychiatric social worker for individuals with very in day treatment with serious psychiatric illness. Wanting to do more, I went to law school. And throughout my career, I have protected vulnerable individuals. At Legal Services, I help people on a daily basis. I worked with survivors of domestic violence get PPOs, but I didn't stop there. I also helped keep them housed. During the foreclosure crisis, I fought at the banks against foreclosure. I helped people get their children back who were, accused of abuse and neglect simply because they were poor. This has been my entire career. Even in my short time in private practice, I was protecting individuals, working with survivors of domestic violence, especially in family law cases where I've made new law at the Supreme, in a published decision in this state. And I've worked with people from trial to appeal. I've tried numerous family law cases helping people. In addition to that, even in my current work at the Attorney General's Office in Health, Education, and Family Services, I work with foster care children, working to protect them in the foster care system on a daily basis. And I will protect and work with the families and children in this community for the entire time I am on the bench. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask another question. The Circuit Court handles waivers of parental consent for women under 18 seeking an abortion. What are your views on the question of whether women have a right to decide for themselves whether to have an abortion? And this round of questionings, answers will start with Mr. Rummel. Nick Rummel?
Thank you. I believe judicial candidates are allowed to state their personal views. I'm strongly pro-choice. I believe that that's a choice that women alone can make in consultation with whomever they'd like to make that decision with. Certainly, I would follow the law regarding parental waivers. It's an awesome responsibility to make that decision. I certainly would listen. I have a lot of experience with kids in crisis. Before I started my legal career, I was in child psychology. I participated in many child psychology research projects. I worked for many years as a crisis intervention person with Ozone House and later a supervisor. So I know what it's like for teens in crisis. I had the opportunity to do preschool education to K-12 education and did my student teaching at Ypsilanti High School. I spent a lot of time with youth. I will listen to youth. I will listen to the dynamics. I will listen to all of the arguments and everything that's made, and I will make a sound decision, and I will certainly protect the legal right that a woman or a young woman has to choose in that very difficult situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tracy Vandenberg?
Yes, I am strongly pro-choice. I am a supporter of Planned Parenthood. And any young woman who comes before me to seek a judicial bypass, and what a difficult thing to do, to have a young girl have to walk into a courtroom and talk to a stranger about such a personal choice. Not only will I listen, but I will help. I will use my social work background, not only to make sure I get all the information and evaluate that young woman and make sure that she is making the choice that she wants to make for her body. I will commit to protecting the rights of women throughout my time as a judge. It is one of the reasons I've run. I unfortunately have seen in divorce and custody cases, domestic violence survivors have their perpetrators continue to abuse them in the system through their custody cases. This is something that happens often. They drag them into court over and over and over again until they are so beaten down. That will not happen in my courtroom. There are things a judge can do to stop that, and I am absolutely committed to doing that. So I will protect young girls, I will protect survivors, and I will protect children. And it's one of the main reasons I'm running for this job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy Reiser.
Thank you. I am pro-choice. I believe that a woman absolutely has, that is a very tough decision to make, and that should be left to the woman. When it comes to a parental waiver, I absolutely will follow the law. I deal with victims of sexual assault and rape on a daily basis. Many of them are young adolescent women, whether it's by a family member or by a stranger. So their bodies have been assaulted and abused, and they then have to go through the court system. So I will recognize the difficulties that they will have needing to come to court for that reason, to seek a parental waiver in a very, very hard emotional situation like that. So I will follow the law. I will respect their choices. And I think I'll do a very good job at it. I know that people have a hard time coming into court, especially at such a young age. We deal with a lot of adolescents who have been victims, and that would go the same for an adolescent or a child or a young woman whose parents might be going through a divorce. I recognize what these kids are going through, and I see it every day. I see it every day, and they have to come into court sometimes and testify against their abusers. So that's what I deal with on a daily basis, and I think I'm equipped to deal with it as a judge, and I respect a woman's choice for her body.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
The next question will start first with Tracy Vandenberg, and again, go through the alphabet. And a number of questions were posed regarding the more general criminal law powers of the circuit court. I realized that initially this would not be the division in which this judge would work, but because it's possible this judge will ultimately have that kind of authority, I think it's appropriate to ask questions along those lines.
Absolutely.
So the first question is, when do you think incarceration as a sentence and on a pre-trial, before trial, is appropriate? Do you have any general thoughts on that? So Tracy Vandenberg.
Absolutely. So one of the things I'm committed to is restorative justice. As I mentioned, Tim Connors, Judge Connors, who runs the peacemaking court, has endorsed my candidacy because he has seen my work in restorative justice in his court. And because he has seen that, he wants us to do that work together. And so I am 100% committed to keeping people out of jail and prison whenever it is safe to do so. And not only that, to help defendants by providing substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, and also GED training, literacy training, all the things that create our school to prison pipeline. One of the things that I've proposed is in our restorative justice peacemaking court is to have a clinical social worker on staff. One of the ways that we can do this without actually we may not be, or a case manager, I plan on having social work students come and work in our courts under my supervision. This is not a new thing. I did this while I was at Legal Services of South Central Michigan. I'm a field instructor for Eastern Michigan University School of Social Work. And what these students did, graduate level students, is they came to Legal Services and they provided wraparound services for my clients. It was a holistic approach to stabilize their lives. This is at no cost to the court. And so this is a program that I plan on implementing and I've already spoken with the judges about, as well as people at Eastern Michigan University and University of Michigan School of Social Work. So I'm absolutely committed to helping people and keeping them out of the system every time we can do it safely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy Reiser.
I think that incarceration is necessary during a pretrial release to protect the community. I don't think it's necessary in every case. If you have a domestic violence case where there are several red flags or indicators of or escalation in violence, or the victim or the children aren't safe in the home, then I think pretrial detention is necessary. I don't think you have to do it in every case. If you have, for example, in the criminal realm, a drunk driving case, pretrial detention in jail is not necessary, but you do need to protect the community. So there are alternatives to pretrial detention. In, for example, a drunk driving case, you can put someone on an alcohol tether. There are other ways to keep the community safe. When it comes to sentencing in criminal matters, you really have to look at what the crime is that you're sentencing for. If it's a property crime or a theft crime, the one thing that I'm looking at is there's some underlying issue. Is there a substance abuse issue? Is there a drug problem? And let's try to deal with that so we can protect the community and get the offender on the right road without incarceration. Now, if you have a sexual assault of a young child or a murder, you're not really looking at alternatives to incarceration because you need to protect the community. Certainly people can make mistakes and rehabilitate, but certain crimes for sentencing require incarceration to keep the community protected. But I've got the experience and I know when to recognize that, and I recognize when you can use other alternatives to incarceration.
Thank you very much. Nick Ramel.
Thanks, Eli. The primary thing to remember is that people pre-trial are presumed innocent, and they are innocent until proven otherwise. I believe in pre-trial incarceration. The law provides that everybody is entitled to personal recognizance unless they are a flight risk or they are a danger to somebody in the community. The vast majority of people deserve personal recognizance, and whether they are incarcerated or not, even if they're released with conditions, sometimes those conditions can be onerous. Things like a tether, which is expensive. Things like other pretrial check-in requirements. People with transportation challenges have difficulty meeting some of these. If you have a job or if you have no car, these are going to be problems for you. You have to take care of your family. I've seen people lose jobs because of pretrial requirements. And what we do want to make sure, as some of the other panelists have pointed out, is that people are taken care of in terms of things like a substance abuse issue, a mental health issue, or some other problem that's going on. We are blessed to have a wonderful bar association in Washtenaw County. I know when I did criminal law, the first thing that I would talk to my clients about is, you are going to go get screened and assessed for substance abuse or for mental health, if that was a concern or an issue in your case. A good judge is also going to inquire into that. But for the most part, pre-trial, you need to be able to show up. There's one other thing. You need to be trusted to show up. And there's one other thing I'm going to point out. I did a comprehensive study in New York recently where people were assessed on paper by a computer as to whether they were flight risks before trial. And the computer actually did a better job at predicting when somebody was a flight risk than the judges who were actually setting bond. It's a very difficult thing to do because they're a complete stranger that appears before a judge. And so I would release them whenever I could. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a number of other questions that were submitted in advance, but I see some hands that are raised, and therefore I would like to start calling on members of the audience for questions. So I will try to unmute those who have raised their hands. If you would please identify yourself before you ask the question, that would be great. So I have a question from Karen. Let's see. You should be unmuted. Karen Customer?
I'm sorry, I did not ask a question.
Did not. Okay, sorry. I saw a hand raised. I will move on to Donna White. All right.
No question, sorry.
No question. All right. If you could, if you could put your microphone on mute, that would be great. If you don't have a question. So Hugo Mack has a question. Just a second. What? I see.
Yes,
Are you a regular?
me?
Hugo Mack, are you?
Hello?
Hello. Okay, you're here.
Yes, I've got a question. Under current law, if an individual is granted a parole, the prosecutor's got the authority to go to the circuit court and try and block or rescind that parole. I believe strongly that once individuals pay their debt to society, they've earned a right to come back into society and try to reintegrate. I'm curious, if the candidates were elected judge, what would their policy be on granting the applications for rescinding or challenging a parole filed by the county prosecutor?
Thank you very much. So Amy Reiser will answer first.
Thank you. So the policy and procedure for an individual that is eligible for parole from the Michigan Department of Corrections doesn't involve the circuit court judge. The local prosecutor's office can object, but that objection goes to the parole board, not to the circuit court judge. The objection can come from the prosecutor's office, from any victim of a crime, but the objection is handled by the Michigan Department of Corrections parole board, not the circuit court.
Thank you very much. Nick Ramel?
Sure, thanks. Amy is correct about that, but I want to speak generally that I really strongly believe in second chances. Some people need second chances. Some people need third chances. Everybody, almost everybody, can be a productive member of society with some rare exceptions. Mr. Mack, I think you're an example of somebody who is rehabilitated and is producing, being a productive member of society. And, you know, a circuit judge has to recognize that people need an opportunity, and nobody is a throwaway person, not before my court. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Vandenberg.
Absolutely. I agree with the other candidates, and I would say I've had a long time commitment to helping with reentry. I sat on the board of the Michigan Prisoner Reentry Initiative for several years, where we worked to make sure that people coming out of our prisons had the skills and the things that they needed to reintegrate into society. Prior to taking those steps, people would be let out. They wouldn't have a birth certificate, a social security card, just basic documents that we all need to be successful and get a job. And without these documents, how can we put somebody out in the world without even these basic things and then say, go get a job and survive? We have failed. We have failed our formerly incarcerated community members. And that's why I was proud to be on that steering committee, and why I am absolutely committed to helping reintegrate members of our society who have made mistakes whenever it is safe to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions from members of the audience? Again, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. I see a question from Ashton Justice. You should be unmuted.
Hi, I sent my question in the chat, but I guess I can just read it. So the candidates are speaking about domestic violence issues quite a bit. We learned this week when the Capitol was invaded that people looking to incite terror and get what they want will stop at nothing and find egregious ways to go about it that are technically legal. Domestic violence in the family court often presents in a similar fashion, wherein abusers have more power and will aggressively press legal limits without breaking them. As a DV activist, I have worked with hundreds of victims who have not found justice, especially in the family court, and many have lost their children to their abusers. In my experience trying to make progress in this area, elected officials, including judges, will sympathize, but the status quo remains unaffected. It is getting worse because as this continues to happen, there is more case law to support it continue happening. How do you plan to be creative, different, and effective in this area? More specifically, what concrete plans do you have to hold abusers accountable and keep victims and their children safe and together?
Thank you very much. Nick Rommel will be the first to answer this question.
Thank you. Hello, Ashton. Thanks for that excellent question. Domestic violence is insidious. It's not just physical abuse, it's emotional abuse, it's power, imposing power and control in every aspect of life. And especially during this pandemic, we've seen that exacerbated because it's more difficult for people to have places to turn, such as to find housing independently, to have jobs that they can find, to have a safe place to go to. I mean, we have some great resources in this county, but what the court can do is a variety of things to help break that cycle of violence. First of all, when there is a case, whether it's a criminal case or whether it's a civil case in the family law context, such as a protection order or an injunction, a judge needs to be able to recognize that. One of the great things about our brand new court rules in family law is that they require the friend of court to do a domestic violence screening. So there's a new court rule that requires the friend of court to attempt mediation immediately on every new filing. But the first thing they have to do is a domestic violence screening. So we need to train people. Our friend of court people are already very well trained. We need to make sure judges are similarly trained and to recognize all of these signs where even when the victim doesn't speak out necessarily, that they recognize that there's domestic violence going on. Judges need to make sure that they take control of a situation, not let litigation be used to further abuse a survivor. And judges, of course, need to deal with this when there's a criminal case and to make sure that mental health services and other intervention services break that cycle whenever possible. Thank you for that great question.
Thank you very much. Tracy Vandenberg.
Absolutely. Again, having a social work background where I was actually trained in the dynamics, treating families in domestic abuse will help me recognize these dynamics when I see them. In addition to my extensive experience working with survivors. And what Ashton brings up, I have had clients myself who have been dragged through the courts, and no matter what I did for them, their children were at risk. So I very much understand. And what Ashton asked was for concrete plans, and I have some. 1, trauma-informed courtroom. Every one of my staff will be trained in motivational interviewing and trauma-informed court practice so that we're not traumatizing victims who are coming into our court. I'm working with the judges already, talking to them about whether we can have separate seating for victims during the PPO docket, logistically, so that they don't have to sit in the same courtroom with their abusers. Because they do that now. Even though we do have a security guard up there, I want them to be able to feel safer. So that's 1. 2, I am going to start up the domestic violence working group that we used to have in this county, where members of Safe House and the Sheriff's Department and the criminal docket all sat together to talk about what was going on. Currently, there is almost no communication between the civil PPO docket and the 15th District Court domestic violence docket, and of all the district courts, frankly. I'm going to change that so that I know what is going on in our courts and where the abusers are. 3, I am going to make sure that when there's domestic violence, that the perpetrator is sent to training alternatives to aggression. It is not a perfect solution, but absolutely, because they are going to be there in the children's lives, we need to keep trying to make things better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy Reiser.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashton. That's an excellent question. What I plan to do is have all divorce cases that come before me screened for domestic violence, so the individuals can be asked in private if there is domestic violence within the relationship. I think my 18 years of prosecutor representing victims of domestic violence, I have the training myself to recognize the factors and the signs of domestic violence, even if a domestic violence victim isn't willing to file a police report or get the police involved because it would put her or the children at danger. I know that it still exists in relationships. On a personal level, my sister went through a very nasty divorce when I was in law school in Wayne County. She didn't have an attorney. Her husband did have an attorney. You know, he got the kids, she didn't. So I recognize that on a professional and a personal level, that there may be litigants that come before you, and one may have a high-powered attorney and one may not. But the treatment to those litigants is going to be the same. Just because you come before me and you may not have a fancy attorney, I'm going to hear your case. I'm going to listen to you. If there is domestic violence, I'm not going to force the parties into mediation because one of the things that a victim loses in a relationship is power. I want a victim to know that if you are taking this step to separate this relationship that could be deadly, quite frankly, that we will do as a court system everything we can to protect you and the children. So if mediation isn't an option, then we're not going to do it. So I'm going to recognize those factors and I'm going to use them in our everyday practice in the courthouse.
Thank you very much. Eric Sturgis has a question. Let me see if I can permit him to talk. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Tracy Vandenberg. Go ahead,
Yes,
Eric.
okay, so this is a real easy question. Are you committed to running an ethical and positive campaign? And I think it's very important that we have a judge who will act with integrity. So I would like to hear our feeling on running a positive campaign and not attacking our opponents or not spreading false information.
Tracy Vandenberg.
Yes, of course. I expect all of the candidates here to run an ethical campaign. I think they're all good attorneys, and we'll all follow our ethics as attorneys and as individuals. You know, as you can see, I think we're each up here talking about what we bring to this position. I've been focusing on my unique qualifications for the position, being a clinical social worker and being a lawyer with extensive experience in the family courts and extensive civil litigation experience. So absolutely, I think so far it's been, we haven't actually gotten to be together, but I think everybody here is committed to running a positive campaign. I just don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about that. So thanks for your question.
Thank you very much. Amy Reiser.
I devoted my career to being ethical, and I think it is important during the campaign process to be ethical, and I think it's even more important once elected to the bench to be ethical. I think we have excellent candidates for this seat, and I'm proud at our process of bringing all of us before you so you can make an informed decision. I use my judgment and my ethics every day in the work that I do, prosecuting criminal cases now. I have a duty to uphold justice, not only for the victims, but for the accused. So yes, I plan to run an ethical campaign, a professional campaign, and moreover, when I'm on the bench, I will continue my devotion to being an ethical attorney and judge.
Thank you. Nick Ramel.
Thanks, Eric, for that thoughtful question. The thing to remember about judicial campaigns that's different from partisan campaigns, we're not just bound by campaign finance law. Judicial campaigns are expected to act exactly as a judge would. We're bound by the judicial canons of ethics. We have to maintain the appropriate level of dignity. We have to avoid the appearance of impropriety. We have to be honest in our communications. And I'm not only committed to a positive and an ethical campaign as the others have pledged, but I've asked my staff to do the same thing and remain positive in all of their interactions with people too, because the way that we campaign reflects on the way that we will conduct ourselves in office. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is time for one more question from the audience, if there are any. I see no one raising their hand. Therefore, I'm going to ask you one last question that I received in advance, and then you will have a chance to make your closing statements. Do you believe there are problems now with the funding of courts in Washtenaw County? Specifically at the district court level, some of the district courts get a very significant percentage of their budget from fines imposed on people coming before those courts. Do you think that's a problem? And what do you think the state should do about that? And this round of answers starts with Amy Reiser.
I think that, as always, I think more funding would be better. What I'd like to see in terms of the circuit court that we do have now at the district court, but they're mainly run on grants, are some treatment courts. At the district court level, we have mental health court, we have sobriety court, we have veterans court, and I'd like to see that on the circuit court level. I don't believe that the current funding allows for it, so I think it would have to come from a grant. But I think more funding in any situation would be great. I don't think it's an opportune idea to bring it from fines and costs, because you have a lot of offenders and participates in the court program who can't afford to pay those fines and costs. So you can't really rely too heavily on that, particularly what's happening now with the epidemic and the economy. I don't think we're going to see more funding, but one of the things that I would like to do when I'm on the bench is see some treatment programs for the circuit court level, and that would have to come in the form of a grant.
Thank you very much. Nick Ramel.
Sure, thank you. There's a trend that started many years ago where funds for public services have been cut and cut and cut. And in its place, we impose greater user fees on the consumers of those services. And in the courts, that's the poorest and the least able to afford those things. Even small fines can be burdensome and onerous. Amy reminded me of a story many, many years ago when I was a student. I got a ticket and it was like 30 or 35 bucks, and I couldn't even afford that. And I asked the judge if I could do something else to take care of the fine. And I spent the day washing police cars at the Ann Arbor Police Station. But we have to be cognizant that every time we say, this is your fine, this is your bond, this is your court cost, this is your fee that goes to the state, it's just a burden on somebody who lives paycheck to paycheck and who has a great deal of difficulty just trying to keep their family together. So I definitely support strong funding for our courts, and to the extent possible, not passing on those costs to those least able to afford them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tracy Vandenberg.
Absolutely. Michigan residents should not face a judge who needs money from a defendant to operate a court. In fact, our Supreme Court has said in People versus Cunningham that they're not allowed to do that, that state law does not provide authority to impose cost upon criminal defendants to fund day-to-day activities. And thankfully, because of that case, we now have the trial court, we have a task force that issued its final report in September of 2019, talking about how we are going to fix that problem. And how we're going to fix it is with statewide funding. Now, I agree with my colleagues that in every way we can, we need to reduce the burden on criminal defendants in terms of cost. I cannot tell you how many times in my work at Legal Aid, I saw somebody become homeless because of having their license suspended and the fines that went along with that. It would start with a ticket, and then they couldn't pay the ticket, and then they would lose their license, and then they might be incarcerated, and they're incarcerated for one day, and then what happens? They lose their job, they can't pay their rent, and they end up in our jails. Is that more cost effective? Of course it's not. Is it humane? Of course it's not. So I am absolutely committed to working to solve this problem. Luckily on the trial court, we're very well funded. Only 4% of our budget comes from fines. And that's because we don't have the tickets that cause people to become homeless. That's in the district court. But 14B, 86% of their budget is collected on the backs of Ypsi Township residents. We must advocate with our state. And that's why elections are important, because we need people in the legislature who are going to change that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've now coming to the end of this panel. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. And the order will be Nick Rummel, Tracy Vandenberg, Amy Reiser. Nick Rummel.
Thanks, Eli. I've spent my entire career helping to give people a voice. I've learned that everybody is fighting some kind of battle, and they just want to be heard. People have more in common than we sometimes realize. They, want to live a long and happy life. They want to take care of their loved ones and their family and be productive members of society. But as we've seen a lot more lately, we sometimes forget to hear and listen to each other. We learned in civics class that there are 3 branches of government, but it's not always easy to get the president or the governor or the legislature to hear you. But the judiciary is different, because if you or your loved one has a case, not only is a judge required to listen to you, a judge is obligated to give you what you seek if you have the better argument. I want to be a different kind of judge. I want to be the kind of judge who sits down at the table with you, rolls up my sleeves, and helps you solve your problem. Because when you have a problem that comes before the court, you need somebody to help give you a voice. And I will give you that voice and I will listen. Because when I am a judge, the most important voice in the courtroom will not be mine. It will be yours. Before I sign off, and before I get a chance to have that voice in the courtroom, I do want to remember that you have a voice on election day. And I want to make sure that you educate yourself about the candidates. This has been a small part. Please go to my website, nickforjudge.com. Learn more about me and contact me through my website. I would love to talk with you. I'd love to listen to what you have to say, and I'll try to help. Thank you. Be safe, be sane, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you very much. Tracy Vandenberg.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here today. You know, I'm sitting here with some very fine attorneys. And if you're a victim of a crime and you need a great prosecutor, you should call Amy Reiser. If you've lost your job and you need a great employment lawyer, you absolutely should call Nick Ramel. I am a clinical social worker, a family law attorney, and trial lawyer with decades of experience directly related to the position we are all running for. My experience is what the families and children in Washtenaw County deserve and need. They deserve a judge with expertise in the area that that judge is deciding. They deserve a judge who has a passion for this area of law, which is demonstrated by having done this area of the law throughout 2 careers. First, treating families, and now advocating for them. I am making a commitment to the family and children of Washtenaw that I will stay with you long term. As a judge, I can sit for 4 terms, and during that time, I will stay on as your family court judge. And that's important because these cases go on for long periods of time. It's not just one and done. You can stay with a custody case for 10 years. And just as I've stayed with clients throughout my career, I will stay with you. I thank you for your vote, your time, and I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you so much. And please, you can contact me, tracyforjudge.com. I will answer your questions. I will always listen. And I always am open to feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy Reiser.
Thank you, Eli. This is not an uncommon thing for me to speak before a large group of people, although in Zoom it is. I speak to juries every month for trials, for the work that is done in our courthouse, the work that I've been doing for the last 18 years serving this community. So I am your candidate, and I want to encourage you to look at our backgrounds, look at the experience that we've had. My mom worked in the public schools. My dad was a Teamster. I worked at McDonald's, so I know what it's like to have that small paycheck. I have worked my entire life, and I am dedicated to this community, to Washtenaw County, and I want to carry that over to the bench and serve the community as a judge. And I believe that I am the most qualified candidate because of the trial work that I have done. Homicide trials, sexual assault trials, drunk driving trials, child abuse trials. I have dealt with the families in this community that are in crises. And that's what's happening when you come into the family court. You are in crises. No one wants to be there ending their marriage, deciding who's going to raise your kids. That is a stressful situation. And that's the experience that I've had for the last 18 years, dealing with victims that don't want to come to court to testify against their abusers, dealing with families who have lost loved ones. So I have the experience, I have the dedication, and I'm willing and ready to work at the circuit court level. I want to be your next circuit court judge. So please visit my website, amyreiser.com, and get out and vote on August 4th. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the panelists I think there's only one thing the audience probably could agree on. This is going to be a really tough choice. And I'd like to take a 30-second break while I put together the District 14B District Court panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. I see the panelists are all present. Just give me 1 second. I will kind of make sure your images appear. All right, I think we are ready to begin. Elaine Washington, Mark Nelson are the two candidates for the 14B District Court position. I'm again going to proceed with the same ground rules as with the Circuit Court panel. And so we will start with 2-minute introductions. We will proceed by, start with Mr. Nelson, since N comes before W in the alphabet. And then we will go back and forth with who answers questions first. So Mr. Nelson, would you please make a 2-minute statement introducing yourself?
Morning, Eli. Thank you. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm currently the Magistrate and Court Administrator for the 14B District Court serving Ypsilanti Township. In 2009, I was appointed by then newly elected Judge Pope to serve as the Township's Magistrate. In 2012, I took on the dual role of Court Administrator and Magistrate, and I'm serving that capacity to this date. I'm running to fill the seat being vacated by Judge Pope due to his retirement, and I have Judge Pope's endorsement to my candidacy. I want to start out a little bit by telling you about the district courts. In Michigan, we call the district courts the People's Court. The reason for this is people are going to come into contact with the court is most likely going to be with district courts. In fact, the district courts hear more cases in the state of Michigan than the rest of the courts in the state combined. What this means to our community is the results in district court are going to have effects in our community. They're going to have effects on the individuals who come before the courts, and they're going to take those effects with them when they return back to our community. The courts need to strive for the most positive outcomes in these interactions with the courts and the community. I am personally invested in these positive outcomes. I'm a lifelong resident of this community. I'm a 1989 graduated of Ypsilanti High School. My wife Carrie and I live in Ypsilanti Township, and our son attends Lincoln Consolidated Schools. With 12 years on the bench serving as magistrate, I have the experience that matters. I've heard thousands of cases from the bench in my courtroom. As court administrator, I know the business of the court. I oversee and operate a $1.3 million budget. We have a $155,000 drug court grant that I manage. And I have an excellent relationship with the staff and personnel at 14B District Court. These are all things that will matter day one when selecting your next judge. And I look forward to having the opportunity to be your next judge in 14B District Court here in Ypsilanti Township. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elaine Washington.
Good morning, Eli. First of all, I want to thank you guys for putting on this panel. I appreciate it. Experienced, passionate, and decisive. Those are my taglines if you've looked at them. I'm passionate about people. I'm running because I want to ensure that the goals that have been set up by our criminal justice system, such as fairness and due process, and more specifically, the treatment of all people with dignity and respect is what we get in Ypsilanti Township. I'm blessed as a first-generation college graduate to have attended the University of Michigan. I come from Southern roots in Mississippi, grew up in Ann Arbor for my teenage years, but I've been a resident of Ypsilanti Township for the past 26 years. The values touted by our system should be what we get when we walk into the Ypsilanti District Court. I want to be able to ensure the people there that when they walk in, the judge, that they're going in front of them, understands them, relates to them, and that they are heard. I know that there are unmet needs in Ypsilanti Township, such as mental health issues that need to be addressed in mental health courts. There's a disparity of resources, and we need to make sure that we have restorative justice practices in that court. I want to take a holistic approach to making that happen by addressing the issues that are causing concern. 63% recidivism rate in Ypsilanti Township needs to be addressed. I have the experience of being a court judicial attorney at the circuit court level. I've tried over 1,000 cases. I'm a litigator. That's what I've done. I've been before every single judge in this county. I have the endorsement of over 200 people. I have that level of experience to make decisions that are going to be fair and honest. I am someone that you can trust. And I'm asking that you would give me your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start with the question. Lorraine Washington will answer first, then Mark Nelson. And that is, what challenges does this particular court, 14B District Court, face, and how do you propose to respond to those challenges? This in some ways asks you to elaborate on your opening statements, but I assume your answer is not going to be everything is fine. I hope to keep it running as it is. So Lorraine Washington.
Thank you. Well, one of the challenges that we face was mentioned by the previous panel, which is funding of the court. It's set up by a system where funding comes from our local government, and it's not a problem that they created. It's a funding problem in general. And in that particular court, 86% of the court's funding is paid by fines and costs. We need to address that. And I intend to address that by getting additional grants, as was said earlier. Like was mentioned earlier, there is a study that was done that suggests that we set up a state level funding system, but that's not in place. So until that happens, what we got to do is come up with other methods of addressing those particular issues, including getting grants from the BJA. I've already looked into those grants, and there are a number of them. Improving community supervision and outcomes through swift and certain fair responses. Justice reinvention initiatives, reducing violent crimes by improving the justice system, and different innovations in supervision that we need to actually address by building capacity to make communities safer. Those grants do exist. They come in the funds in the amounts of $1,000 per $1 million per grant. So if we are dealing with, and Mr. Nelson's right, we're dealing with a budget of $1.3 million. If we got a grant that was for $1 million, we could change the resources in this community so that we're not actually taking the money off the backs of the people that are being served. We need to bring mental health, and we need to bring restorative justice. I'm endorsed by 7 judges in this community because they believe that I'm the person who can bring those particular resources to the community.
Thank you very much. Mark Nelson.
This comes down to questions of what the district court deals with and what we see with people coming through the front doors of the district court. The district courts in Michigan, as I said, serve the vast majority of people that come before the courts. That means we see everything that comes before the court that society has to offer. We, in many ways, are triaging these issues. We're dealing with substance use disorder, we're dealing with mental health issues, we're dealing with poverty, we're dealing with all the issues that society has that come into the district court. They come before us on a daily basis. In a number of these instances, the courts may not be the best suited to handle these situations, but we have them. So if we're not the best suited, we have to learn how to become the best suited. We have a drug court in Ypsilanti Township District Court that serves the entire county. There's a mental health court in 15th District Court that likewise serves the entire county. So those needs can be met and are being met on a daily basis. We refer cases frequently to the mental health court in 15th District Court, and they likewise, and as do the rest of the courts, refer cases to us on our mental health, on our substance use disorder docket. So there are a number of things that are being done right, but absolutely there's issues that need to be addressed. Funding of the courts is a huge issue. The findings of the state commission that funding should be on a statewide level is absolutely correct. The courts should not be vying for funding in competitive natures as via grants. Courts should be funded fairly and equally, sort of like school funding, right? I mean, you need to have fair funding. across the board. It has to be, so that we can provide the same level of services every other court does. Much has been made of the 86% number, which you have to realize though is our budget is much smaller, and we were able to run our cases on about an $80 per case number, whereas the other courts are running about $200 per case. So there's a huge disparity in the funding of the courts, and that does need to be addressed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd now like to open the floor to questions from the audience. If you have a question, would you please use the raised hand icon? I do not see any raised hand icons. Therefore, I'll pose another question on my own steam. And this one, Mark Nelson will answer first, and then Elaine Washington. What qualities do you think are most important for the judge in this court to have, and why?
So there's a reason that in Michigan, the judges that serve the communities they serve have to live in the community they serve. And that is an important quality of the judge. We have to know our community, we have to be a member of our community, and we have to have a track record of service to our community. I've lived here my entire life. I've served on multiple not-for-profit boards, including Meals on Wheels, Ypsilanti JCs, and I currently serve on the Eastern Michigan Legal Resource Board. So it's all about public service, and that's where my commitment lies. I have a commitment to this community. I've resided here my entire life, and I'm going to strive to continue the commitment to our community. It also has to do with knowing the community. I've served in the court now for 12 years, in my 12th year serving in the court, and I've gotten to know our community much better than I did before. I've known it, of course, by living here my entire life, but I know all aspects of our community by the folks that come before our court. So I think that's very important that we are members of our community, we're reflective of our community, and we understand our community and can figure out the ways to best serve our community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Elaine Washington.
Thank you. I believe that there are a number of qualities that are important, including those which involve being able to relate to the people who come into the courtroom. You have to have a relatability factor, you have to have experience, and you have to have that community connection. And I come with all of those. I have 26 years of experience practicing law. I have, as I said, practiced every area of the law, from having to do DWLS cases to having to do murder cases. I'm a litigator. I've tried cases in the courtroom. When you come before a district court judge, because of the volume of cases, you need someone who has done that. I've been an assistant public defender. I've worked for a circuit court judge as their chief administrative person, being a judicial attorney. I've written over thousands of opinions, and as a public defender, I've tried over thousands of cases. That's what you need when you come before a district court judge, someone who has that experience, that when you come before them, they know exactly what your argument's about. You want somebody who's able to just not listen to you, but also to hear you. You want to be heard when people are talking to you. So when you walk out of that courtroom, you feel like, although the results might not be exactly what you wanted, because it doesn't always work that way, that the person that was before you was heard. You need someone who's able to develop partnerships. And I have developed partnerships with many other organizations, community mental health, NAMI. I actually sit on the boards of many different organizations, including the Habitat for Humanity board, which is what I sit on right now. I've been the president of many organizations, and I have connections in Lansing because I am also the elected State Bar of Michigan commissioner. And so I deal with issues like MIDC, when we're trying the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, which actually decides about representation of clients in our courtrooms. Representation in 14B had been an issue at some point. The MIDC addressed that, and I want to continue to address it.
Thank you very much. I see that Guy Kuhnke has a question. I'll unmute you. You should be able to talk, Guy.
Thank you. I have a single question in 17 parts. Just kidding. Seriously though, Mark mentioned that the district court is the people's court. It's often called the people's court. And what I want to ask both candidates is, Being that the district court is a court of record, a full trial court that is subject to the same rules, mostly the same rules as the circuit court in terms of procedure and everything, how will you as a sitting judge balance the fact that you as a district court judge will get many improper people in front of you without representation who don't know the court rules? Of course, you're not allowed to give legal advice. So how are you going to walk that tightrope in making sure that these people are heard properly and that their cases are adjudicated properly, given that they're subject to the same rules as represented parties?
Right. This goes first to Elaine Washington.
So when people come before you, as Mr. Kuhnke has indicated, you cannot give them legal advice, but you can provide them with resources that provide them with that legal advice. And I have the actual connections with people over at Legal Services to be able to direct them to get the advice that they need. And also, I think what we should do is start setting up some of the avenues and technology that we have through our system to provide at least guidance in the form of YouTube videos so that they can actually see what the process is like in Ypsilanti Township for the district courts and district courts in general. One issue I do want to address with respect to mental health courts is that when you come into our courts for mental health and directing someone who has transportation issues and who has other types of socioeconomic deprivations that don't allow them to get transportation to the city of Ann Arbor, is not good. We are dealing with a population of people here who are 30% almost socioeconomically disadvantaged, and you need to have the resources in that court to be able to address that. And so you can put pamphlets out and other information to direct them to resources. As a part of the State Bar of Michigan, we have the Lawyer Helps Program. That Lawyer Helps Program is something that you can guide people to in order to help them, and you can help them with the Modest Means programs, which I have participated in the past. Modest Means is a program through the Washtenaw County Bar Association, as well as a program at the statewide level, and you can get free consultations with attorneys to help them so that you're not crossing that line. So you got to provide the litigants that are coming before you, the people of Ypsilanti Township, with those particular resources in order for them to be able to do their best jobs in coming in. And I'm also going to involve in what's called limited scope representation for people who are both in the criminal process as well as the civil process. Limited scope means you can do pieces at a time without hiring an attorney.
Thank you very much. Mark Nelson.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you for the question. So this is a challenge we run into on a daily basis. In my courtroom, I hear civil cases and criminal cases, and often people come in without representation. Attorneys like Mr. Kuhnke who come in before our court do an excellent job of navigating with those unrepresented litigants and are fair with them, but the court has to make sure that those outcomes are fair for everyone who comes before the court, whether represented or not represented. It's absolutely correct. We cannot give legal advice from the bench. We can provide guidance. We can provide resources. I've been in the court now for 12 years. I've had the relationships with legal aid. I have relationships with the other resources that are available to litigants, unrepresented litigants on the civil side. So we do make those resources available. Our landlord-tenant filings, we provide resources to the tenants when they come into the courtroom. We provide them with information with regard to the legal aid, with regard to HAWK for assistance with payment of rent and things of that nature. On the criminal side, as Ms. Washington indicated, Michigan Indigent Defense is relatively new for us, although we're a few years into it. And that has been a wonderful outcome for us. We have attorneys at arraignment. We didn't have that before, and that was a system failure. That was across the board for all the courts in Michigan. Now we have attorneys present at arraignment, and that makes a huge difference in how the case starts from day one. So the issue of non-representation is an important issue. It definitely is an area where, again, funding the courts becomes problematic. The current setup needs to be changed. We need state funding rather than local funding for our court system. And we need to make sure that parties that are coming before the courts have the tools to navigate the court system. It's a difficult system to navigate at times, but from the bench, we can help by listening, help by providing resources, and help by making sure that they're treated fairly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that Janet Cannon has a question. Janet, I think you have to unmute yourself to ask that question. Yes.
Hi, thank you. You're probably all both aware that Ypsilanti Township and the area have a large number of undocumented workers and families. And we're all aware of the difficulty of low-income populations, African-American populations, of accessing the courts and feeling, in confidence, having trust in the courts. And for the undocumented community, it's even worse, because there's the additional stress of fearing that if they address themselves to the legal system, that they will be noticed by ICE. And although I know we're all aware that Washtenaw County has a policy which says we're not acting as surrogates for ICE and we're not turning people over, there's a high level of mistrust and also very, very little information about what legal things are possible for them. And I wondered if you have thought about addressing that need for outreach as well.
Mark Nelson, will you please answer first?
Sure. So this is a question that is a problem for society in general, of course, and as a societal problem, it does come before our courts. We make no distinction about the people that come before us. We treat everybody equally. We do have issues where if there's going to be tangential consequences to a sentence or tangential consequences to a guilty plea, we have an obligation to inform the individual of that. Again, this walks down the fine line of getting into their personal information that may be detrimental to them to disclose versus ensuring that their rights are protected. Judge Pope and I have been committed to make sure that people have appropriate representation. In appropriate cases, we seek out immigration attorneys specifically to represent individuals who may need their services, again, without our direct inquiry as to whether or not that's actually the need, but if there's an indication that that's there, we do look for those resources for the individuals. Again, having representation through all stages of the proceedings is very important. I know the Washtenaw County Public Defender's Office is committed to this issue and is better suited to make those inquiries as they can do it in a confidential manner and then bring those to the court, bring those issues to the court's attention appropriately. So yes, we're committed at the court to ensuring that there are no unintended ancillary consequences as a result of their interactions with the court. And we want to make sure that our members of our community and all members of our community are treated fairly and don't have unintended or negative outcomes that will trickle out into our community.
Thank you very much. Ray Washington.
Thank you for that question. One of the people that's endorsing me is Angie Martell. And Angie Martell services a lot of people who are in that immigration and immigrant community. I've sat down and I've spoken with her and I've spoken with other people in the community about trying to address some concerns that they actually do have about going into the court, all courts, but specifically 14B because we do have a higher population of those folks in our community. And one of the things that we want to make sure happens is that when they walk into the courtroom, they don't have that fear that they are going to actually get picked up by ICE when they come into the courtroom. I sat on, and I no longer do, but I just recently got off the ACLU Lawyers Committee. And that was a part of what we were trying to address for them, is the concern that when people walk into the courtroom, that they will be picked up. And so when people walk into the courtroom, what they do is they have a tendency to plead to whatever the charge is so that they can get out quickly, or they have a fear of going up into the courtroom in the first place so that they get bench warrants. It is going to be one of my purposes to make sure that that doesn't happen and that people feel like when they walk into the courtroom, they have an opportunity that if they want to fight that ticket that they got, they can fight it. They have, if they get driving while license suspended tickets, they feel like the best way to resolve it without having to keep coming back to court is so that they can actually pay that ticket and walk out the courtroom, so that that day their situation is over. And so I want to ensure folks through processes of fairness and just making sure that they understand when they walk in that, and I'm also endorsed by the Washtenaw County Sheriff, and as you know, his policy is that he will not be participating in that process, and he and I are in agreement with that. We're on the same page with a lot of different issues, including that one. I want to make sure that everybody feels like they can get a fair opportunity when they come to my courtroom.
Great, thank you so much. There's time for one last question. Hugo Mack, I believe, has a question, and then we'll turn to the closing statements. So, Mr. Mack, I believe you should be able to talk right now.
Oh, hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Historically in this nation, people of color have never received the full measure of justice due them. As we know, the original Constitution relegated Black people to 3/5 of an individual. I want to know, are the candidates for judges committed to fully understanding the racism that does exist institutional-wise, particularly typified by the 43% of African Americans in the county jail, where African American males are only 3.8% of the county population? And do you acknowledge that, and how do you intend to ensure that institutional racism does not play a part in your decisions?
Mark Nelson, I think you're first answering this one. No, sorry, Elaine Washington. Sorry, Elaine Washington, you're first.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Mack. I appreciate that question. In Ypsilanti Township, we, unlike any other part of the county, this jurisdiction reflects people that look like me. And that they look like me not just based on my color, but because of the way that they were brought up. Many of them were brought up poor. I came here from Mississippi initially, and a lot of them migrated from the South. I am very aware of and have been a person who has actually been exposed to racism in the past. I am very cognizant of the fact that in Ypsilanti Township, we have the highest percentage of people that look like me, because there are actually 42.1% of the people are people brown and Black people of color. And I want to make sure that when people come before me, they are very aware that they're going to get the same treatment regardless of their race, regardless of their color. That's whether they're Black, white, or brown. When they come before this court, they're going to be treated fairly and equally, and the equity would apply to everybody. I fully understand the issues of racism because I've experienced it. It's one of the reasons why I'm still a first-generation college graduate. I'm endorsed by Supreme Court Justice Bridget McCormick for this position because she knows that I'm the best person to bring the equitable systems of justice and fairness into the Ypsilanti District Court. And I want to make sure you understand one thing too, that these positions don't just stop with those outlined types of areas. We also have to make decisions at the circuit court for whether a case is going to get bound over to the circuit court at the preliminary examination stage. So you're going to sit as a trier of fact to determine whether or not a case is going to go on to the circuit court level and someone gets tried as a felony. It's important in that area as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark Nelson.
Thank you. So, when the courts open again, our doors are currently closed, of course, due to the current health crisis. But when our doors open again, I invite everybody to come into our courts and see what we see from the bench. And there absolutely is a racial disparity in the number of cases that are brought by race and the number of enter into the courtrooms. We have to remember that the courts do not decide who comes to the courts. The prosecutor charges cases, the police make the arrests, and we deal with those outcomes. As Ms. Washington indicated, these have to be dealt with fairly, regardless of race, regardless of background, regardless of mental health issues, substance use disorder issues, regardless of religious background, whatever the background may be. These have to be dealt with in an equitable fashion. I have a track record of serving on the bench, and I believe if you ask anybody that's come before my court, they'll tell you that they've been treated fairly. regardless of their background. Now, we have to recognize that these structures exist and we have to address them. How do we address them best? Of course, we have to address them on a societal level and make sure that, that the resources are available to everybody in our society to make sure that the outcomes that bring people to our courts stop. We have to improve education. We have to improve all the things that come in people's lives before coming to court. But once they're there, they have to be treated equitably and fairly. And I believe I have a track record showing that we do that here at the 14B District Court. And I'm committed to continuing that. I'm continuing to learn. I'm committed to continue to engage with our community. Having lived here my entire life, I know the history of this community. And that history is in the background of all of my thoughts with regard to what's going on the bench. So I look forward to the opportunity to continue to serve, and will certainly keep these issues in mind every time I take the bench and look out to people before me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've now reached the end of the question period. The meeting is coming to a close, and I'd like to ask the candidates to make closing statements. So you have 2 minutes each. Mark Nelson, you'll go first, then Lorraine Washington. Mr. Nelson.
I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you today. I see a number of people have stayed through the entire meeting, so I appreciate that, especially given the nice weather we're experiencing here today. Eli, thank you for moderating this important discussion, and thank you to the Democratic Party for putting this on. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm running to be your next judge in the 14B District Court. The seat is open due to the upcoming retirement of Judge Pope, who served our community since the beginning of the court. He was our first magistrate when the court opened in 1985. And when Judge Collins retired, he became our next judge. Judge Pope has endorsed my candidacy. I have his full support as we move forward. My experience as magistrate and court administrator is unmatched. This is experience that matters. I have a track record of service to both the 14B District Court and to our community. My lifetime of experience in community means I know the history of this community, as I said previously. And this is important in serving the community. I look forward to my continued service as the next judge of 14B District Court. For more information about me and my candidacy, please visit marknelsonforjudge.com. If you have any questions that weren't answered today, please contact me directly at info@marknelsonforjudge.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lorraine Washington.
Thank you. Our society is built on the lofty ideas that love makes the world go round. But our criminal justice system so far is built on fear. It's a fear-based system, set up of 3 separate components. Those are law enforcement, corrections, and our court system. I'm running because I want to make sure that we reform the court system part of our justice system. The fear-based model isn't working. Lock them up and throw away the key hasn't been working. The definition of insanity is doing the same things and expecting a different result. I want to bring a holistic approach to justice in this community by having the restorative justice program. And that's why Judge Timothy Connors has endorsed my campaign. You can do both. You can protect society and reform the individual. Compassion can name and address the behavior that's before the court without shaming or throwing away the person. We can protect society from really bad people because they exist, but yet transform those who have had a bad start or have suffered from trauma or have mental health issues. They can be reformed and become productive citizens. You are literally placing the lives of the community into the hands of a judge. The only people who have the authority to take away your rights are judges. You need someone who is thoughtful, considerate, learned, and connected, and experienced in both life and the law. I bring that having tried over 1,000 cases, not sat just as a court administrator, but a person with experience who can make those decisions. Some cases are cut and dry. When a person has committed a crime and it's cut and dry, you don't need someone who hasn't had that experience. I bring to you the experience of litigation so that when the tough decisions are to be made, I'm there for you to make those decisions based on experience. Vote for me, Lorraine Washington, on November 3rd. Go to www.reignforjudge so that you can learn more about my campaign. Thank you for this.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank all the panelists today, the District Court Judge panelists and the Circuit Court. We are now just about 2 minutes away from closing time at this meeting. I want to ask Chris Savage or Mary Hall Cham if they have any closing remarks they'd like to make? I see Janet Cannon has her hand up. I'm not sure if this was this time or last time. Janet, do you have?
Sorry, I just didn't put it down. I'm fine.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure. So I guess again, ask Chris and Mary if they want to say anything. If not,
yeah, I would just like to thank Eli and Satish for putting together this incredible meeting. We had over 100 people on this meeting throughout pretty much the entire time. Thrilled to see so many people still engaged, even though we're having to be physically separated from each other. I would echo what Eli said earlier, that you know, we have hard choices to make for these races, and we have solid candidates for both positions. So, you know, no matter who wins, I'm excited that we're going to have solid, good Democratic candidates, and you know, wish you all well on your campaigns. I know it's a struggle right now to do that, but I just, you know, encourage everybody to stay involved, stay aware, keep yourself informed, and keep yourself safe. And we'll see you next month.
Thank you so much. With that, we will end the meeting. Stay safe.